And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us today on our podcast, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Tom Barta. Tom is a really interesting guy who I had the good fortune of meeting a couple of years ago. He's a premier marketing leadership expert. He was formerly a partner at McKinsey. He is an author of a book, and he's got another one in the pipeline. He's consulted and marketed for over 20 years in 14 industries and 45 countries. He started his career at Kimberly-Clark on the Kleenex side, and then moved over to McKinsey, and he's been on his own for quite a while now. And he also writes frequently for Forbes and Marketing Week. So, Thomas, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Great. So let's just dive right in here. So you've been on multiple sides of sort of the content equation, if you will, right? So corporate guy, corporate guy at Kimberly-Clark, then moved over to the world of consulting. And if you're going to do that, you might as well do it at McKinsey, and then off on your own as an author, speaker, advisor, etc. So give me a sense of the differences from each of those perspectives, right? And how that has helped you to succeed at where you are now.
Oh, so what's the difference? So let's start by telling you why I got into the corporate world in the first place.
Sure.
And it started when I was 6, and I loved advertising. And my parents were quite nervous about that. And I felt, this guy is becoming a marketing guy. And I did, because you typically want to become what your parents don't want you to become. And I loved it. And the beauty of being what some people will call that the client side, right? Or in an industry is that, of course, you are directly shaping products, you're shaping markets, you're shaping what people see. And then, of course, you get this fatigue that you believe that nothing you do is super strategic, right? It's all day to day, it's all a nitty-gritty. And I was also fed up, by the way, with finance cutting all my budget. So I felt, I have to join McKinsey and to tell CEOs how marketing works. And it was interesting, when you're a consultant, then you learn that, you sometimes have exactly that helicopter view. You have exactly that wonderful perspective of, moving across different industries. Of course, with the downside that sometimes you can't influence things yourself. And by the way, that was the similarity, both as a marketer and both as a consultant, and both now, you can't influence things as much as you want. So it's all the 3 roles have one similarity. You have to learn how to influence people, because they can all say no.
Got it. The common thread there is really influence, right? And it's interesting when you're a marketing person inside of a company, sort of battling with finance to get the appropriate budgets. That's one level of influence. When you're a McKinsey consultant being paid top dollar to influence a CEO or leadership that's hired you, that's different. But now let's talk about it from where you are today, right? As an author and advisor. Tell me a little bit about the type of work that you do and whom you do it for.
So to step back, I work in a niche, and that niche is helping very senior marketers, customer leaders. I mean, titles vary nowadays, be more influential inside their organizations, because that's my way of making the customer front and center in the company. That's what I do. And this splits. It's a portfolio type of work. First off, I do publish and write a lot. Now, everybody who writes knows that it's not, you don't write for profit. It's not how it works. I mean, you write to build the thinking, to build interest and thought leadership and ideas. I think a third of my time is I spend actually as a professional speaker, as a conference speaker who helps people at these conferences actually, kick ass a bit, mobilize people and say, guys, you can actually change things. And it sounds difficult, but it is possible. And I'd say a third of my time I work directly with a handful of people to make change happen in their company.
So let me sort of recap that. So the writing reaches lots of people for little money, direct money, right? But it has impact and influence.
Yeah.
Speaking, good money reaching a select group of people. They have to be at that conference that you're speaking at, right? And then ultimately the advisory work, which is far less people, probably I would argue for, good exchange of money as well in terms of the business model underneath that. You're giving some of your stuff away, short form exposure via speaking, and then the implementation and the in-depth work in terms of the executives that you work with. Is that sort of a fair recap?
Yeah, that's a pretty decent summary. Perhaps with a small exception, I'm a pretty well paid speaker, which is not the norm. But you're right. I think that is the way you said this makes sense.
So let me ask you this. So obviously, you mentioned that you've got this niche. So by default, when you have a niche, it means most people in the universe you can't help, and there's no real point in you wasting time, energy, effort trying to reach them. So tell me about sort of your selection process as it relates to each of the three buckets that you mentioned. Sort of where you'll write for, where you'll speak, and then ultimately the type of work that you do on an engagement level.
To make this sound great, I would really have to post rationalize a lot and suggest to
Okay.
you that there is a super sophisticated strategy. But let me start this way. I started out believing that there's a group of people I can help. That was my idea. And if I'm very honest, I had absolutely no business model whatsoever. And I liked that because I wasn't about selling to people something. I wanted to get the word out and get people interested. But based on this, let me tell you what happened. I actually started to work for people first. So I didn't do any writing. I actually started out by working with chief marketing officers, chief customer, people I knew. And the moment I left McKinsey, I got a number of people who asked, can I help? Because I was their advisor, mentor before.
Okay.
And through that work, actually, I learned a lot. And this is when I started writing because I thought I have to bring this to more people. So I invested heavily with my co-author, Patty Barwise, in a book. Actually, we published with Mark Hill. It's the 12 Powers of a Marketing Leader. It is so far still the only marketing book, leadership book for marketers. There's nothing out there. So it's pretty niche. And that's a huge effort that takes forever and gets you almost no payback immediately because it is super slow. Because when you do niche, it also means, as you said, right, a lot of people don't care. I mean, if you work in HR, you don't want to read my book. If you work in finance, maybe you don't want to read my book.
And that's good and it's bad, right? So
Yeah.
it's
So
good
I
because
will.
if you find the people that it resonates with, it resonates highly.
That's right. But given that, unless you have, a database with all markets in the world or something like that, right? You have a lot of public noise that you make, and there's a lot of waste, right? The good old bar and sharp marketing, you market to everybody, and of course, some people will see it. So I had to go large scale because this is a large universe. Through this came actually the publications. And I'll bring this back into a cohesive story in just a second.
Sure.
Because then Forbes got interested, then Marketing Week got interested, and now I'm writing for those guys, and this will again inform the next book. So I think it's more like, it's not like a stage strategy. I think it's a circle. Everything informs itself and it lands somewhere. On the conferences, it's very interesting, I get a lot of inquiries from people I've never heard of before. And they are not marketers. They are people who either Google me or someone else has told them about. So it's pretty messy, I'd say. And I wouldn't tell someone there's that one strategy. What I have done consistently is keep the topic, went out to all the places I could find and see what lands.
Okay. One of the things that you said a moment or two ago, and I thought it was worth sort of diving in, is you were really clear when you started, even though you didn't have a business model or strategy based on what you said, of who you wanted to work with. So in the work that I do with my clients, we call that client avatars. And what's interesting is when somebody we work with, maybe they have expertise in leadership or management or sales or whatever, and they say to us, wow, and I say to them, well, who would this benefit the most, right? Who would have the most impact and who would you have the most fun working with? And they say, oh man, this would be great for everybody. That makes me cringe, right? Because unless you have the marketing dollars of a Coca-Cola or a P&G or something like that, you can't afford to market to everybody. So tell me a little bit more about the avatar, with the specificity that you could of who it is that you wanted to work with and how you how you chose that. How did you choose to work with those type of folks?
So to step back, I left McKinsey because I was sick and tired that my clients got fired most often. And those are chief marketing officers, right? So I did marketing there. And I had enough of this because I felt these are great people with super, super positive intentions who just don't manage to lead in companies in a way that perhaps other people do. I felt there's a need and I could give something back. So I defined that target group very, very early on. And in fact, it has informed, it started almost like a dream, and it informed the thinking. And then what happens when you start out? Then you do a lot of work. I mean, I did, positioning, who am I, da 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 da. And there is this tendency to want to broaden this to more people. Because every time you say, well, that's probably too narrow, maybe that's too narrow, that's too narrow. So there is a lot of desire to become larger, to become, yes, I'm for everybody. But there's a rule in consulting, and I learned that at McKinsey very strongly, is distinctiveness. As an advisor, you have to have your own personal area of distinctiveness, something that does set you apart. It cannot be leadership general. It cannot be marketing general. It's impossible, right? When you could be if you do it for 50 years and then you're the most known person, but everybody else, you have to find it.
Right. So unless you're Tom Peters,
That's right. And to be honest, Tom Peters, they started out in much simpler markets. Marshall Goldsmith did, Seth Godin. They started out at a time when things were way less cluttered. They wouldn't make it today with their strategy. So today it's very important you're super clear. As you said, who are the people who would benefit most from your work? And I got one target group right, which is chief marketing officer. It's still true. And through this, many more ideas came. There is a group I never thought of, junior conference organizers who book me because they know it's going to go well. And I didn't think of that. And I now understand it and I know how to talk to them. But, you have to be that clear about your target group. Otherwise, you got to be either really lucky or very rich.
well, and the benefit of the clarity, and we touched on this before with the book, is that when you get the right content in front of the right person at the right time, the resonance is there, right? So that does I would say 50 to 80% of the selling for you when you're speaking to their pain points, and when you're, you've got the credibility and you've got the case studies and all that other sort of stuff that goes with it, where they go, oh man, this, we have to get Thomas on the phone and bring him in here. This is exactly what we need, and we need it right now. Tell me a little bit about, we were talking before we got on board here about, you're thinking about another book about when, there's never a shortage of ideas. And there's always, when I talk to folks, there's always, probably 10 books potentially floating around in their head if we lived in a world where you actually made a living and all you had to do was sort of lock yourself in a cabin and write books. But that's not the way it works. When do you choose, or how do you choose? It's, what, this is worthy of the investment that I'm going to make of my time and energy into a book. How do you go about that process? Because I think it's something a lot of people struggle with.
And again, I would have to post-rationalize to make it a super strategy. I'd say like this: the moment the 12 Powers of a Marketing Leader came out, I was so proud, and I was immediately thinking about the next book. And I talked to a lot of people about that book, and I never got traction because people didn't think it was interesting enough, it wasn't strong enough. And writing books, right? This is a market, right? You have to be able to sell these books. I mean, that's what publishers expect. So it takes a while until, again, you find the next thing that lands with people. And that was my process. I think it took me a year longer than I hoped, because I thought I would be faster. But again, now I have something that has landed in so many conversations. I felt like, wow, we're just going to do this now. So that's my process.
But let's touch about landing. So you're out there every day and you're speaking and you're working with clients, et cetera. That's really a research and development lab to try out different thoughts and different concepts and see what sticks. Because once it's in a book, it's done, right? So tell me about sort of you said it was in conversation. You're using your day-to-day sort of experiences and work to test out things that you may or may not want to invest time in vis-a-vis a book.
Well, for me, the keynotes are a great way to test things because when I got invited, I go a bit broader than marketing because typically it's not only marketers there. So I inspire people to think about how they can make change happen. Then I try out different stories, and I know what people can come back with and say, and that's a very cool story. Well, I like that story. Sorry. So I pick up what really lands, what people find fascinating, and what they struggle with, of course, because I will only be useful as an advisor if I help people solve real problems that they truly have, not that I tell them that they have. And that just takes time to find. So yeah, for me, it's the speaking. Those are the test buttons.
So speaking is another benefit of speaking is you obviously have exposure, you have compensation, but using it as a way to test out a concept. And when you do that, I would venture to guess that it's not one day you wake up and the client booked you to speak on X, which is what they wanted, and you come in and totally change it to Y, right? You're going to add into your speech maybe 2, 3, 5 minutes little test test balloons or something? Or how do you actually go about integrating into your keynotes some new concepts that you're thinking about?
Well, first off, the truth about keynote speaking is that clients invite you so everybody has a good time. I mean, that's how keynotes work. As much as you write on the content, everybody wants to have an inspiration. But I think there are many ways to go at the topic. So I'd say 80% of the conferences that I've been to this year have been about digital transformation. I'm not a digital guy. I know enough, but I'll come at this from a leadership level and say, what do you need to make change happen? And why is, you said it earlier, why do we have so many ideas and so little implementation? What can we do? And I think as long as you stick to the storyline, you can test, a lot of ideas along the way and see what lands. And that's how I do it. So I think typically in keynotes, you have a lot of freedom as long as you stick to the agenda.
Got it. And and you made a great point about keynotes, and I think oftentimes people don't understand that, is that what does the buyer of a keynote want? And it's really about engagement, entertainment, maybe a little bit of notoriety if they know who you are. You're really not going to change the world or change anyone's way of acting or believing based on 60 minutes on stage. That's typically just not going to happen.
Well, the truth is, in keynotes, you can probably get one very big point across. And if that point gets people to rethink and to reach out for more, I mean, I also give people practical tips, and many keynotes, people get the book and we go through some details. So I do try to do a little bit more, but you're right, it's a keynote. But, one mindset change, for example, I tell marketers that doing marketing, which is the technical side, in fact, is the smallest factor of success. The largest factor, by over 55%, is change leadership skills in the organization. A lot of people have never heard that. And that makes them think, and it makes them think about. So you can do these things, and these are the big ideas that you need to test also for books. What's the one big idea that make people look up?
Great stuff. So finally, as we start to wrap up here, Thomas, give someone out there, or the folks that are listening out there, one big piece of advice of something they should really start to consider doing if they're focused on leveraging and scaling their content and thought leadership. What's your one big go do this today?
I have a very simple school of thinking, which perhaps not everybody will agree with. But my question, my call to action for people is be helpful. Don't come at this from a perspective, how can I sell more tomorrow morning? I would not be on this podcast, Peter, if I was just about to sell my books, because people at this podcast, they're not going to buy my books. That's not the point.
Right.
As a true consultant, as someone people want to bring in again and again, you have to genuinely help. And you have to be clear what that help is that you can give. And once you're very clear, you just do a lot of it. And I believe it comes back 10 times.
I love that. I've never heard that come back in a negative way to somebody if you're just of a helpful mindset and giving content away in a way that helps others do their job or their role or whatever it is in a better way. And, it might not come back today, but in the macro, it always comes back with interest. Well, thank you for sharing with us today. Just tell folks how they can get in touch with you. How do they find you?
Very easy, thomasbarta.com or on LinkedIn, or if you ever have someone who needs help in marketing leadership, The 12 Powers of a Marketing Leader is your book to buy.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for sharing your experiences with us today. And I think we all learned a lot. So thank you again.
Thank you, Peter.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.